Hello everyone, hope you are all right. As we are discussing the types of reproduction, in this session we will start learning sexual reproduction. As we know that sexual reproduction is the mode of reproduction which depend on the involvement of two individuals, means two parents are required to form a new generation. For example, the bulls cannot alone produce new cubs. Okay, only one bull cannot produce new offsprings, new cows. And only a hen cannot alone produce new chicks, right? In this type of examples, both sexes, that are males and females, are needed to create their offsprings, means to produce their new generations. What is the need or the significance of this sexual mode of reproduction? Are there any limitations of the asexual mode of reproduction which we have been discussing in the previous session? All this we will discuss now. So let us study why the sexual mode of reproduction is significant. The creation of two new cells from one involves the copying of the DNA as well as the cellular apparatus. As we have discussed in the previous sessions, what are the cellular apparatus? The cell organelles. So, for creating the new cells from one parent, what is required? DNA copying. And at the same time, when there are chemical reactions to form DNA copies, new cell apparatus are needed. The DNA copying mechanism cannot be absolutely accurate, and there are resultant errors. And what are that errors? Variations. We have learned that when there is a change in DNA copy, it leads to variations in the organisms. Every individual organism cannot be protected by variations, but in a population, variations are useful for ensuring the survival of different species. Therefore, if organisms came up with reproductive modes that allowed more and more variations to be generated. As we have discussed earlier, that DNA copying mechanism is not accurate. They are precise enough to make the generation of variation a fairly slow process. If the DNA copying mechanism were to be less accurate, many of the resultant DNA copies would not be able to work with the cellular apparatus and would die. This we have already discussed in the first lesson of the chapter, where we learned, do the organism create exact copy of themselves? There we have learned this. Since all of the variations are in living organisms, in living individuals, it is assured that they do not have any really bad effects. We observe that, right? Combining variations from two or more individuals would create new combinations of variants. When we combine two or more variations, and create new individual, then there will be combination of variations. Each combination would be novel since it would involve two different individuals. So, the sexual mode of reproduction involves a process in which there is a combination of DNA from two different individuals. So, this you need to keep in mind. Sexual reproduction is the mode of reproduction in which there is a combination of DNA from two different individuals. But again, this creates a major difficulty. How? If each new generation is to be the combination of DNA copies from two pre-existing individuals, then each new generation will end up having twice the amount of DNA than the previous generation had. What does this mean? If there are two individuals, male and female, they are also created from the DNA copies of their parents. And when they reproduce, they also involve copying of DNA, which means every new offspring, every new child which is formed, every new generation will have twice amount of the DNA. In double, DNA will be double than the previous generation had, and this will create a mess. So how to solve this mess? We have seen earlier that as organisms become more complex, the specialization of tissue increases. As the body of the organism is complex, that many specialized tissue it will have. So there is one solution that many multicellular organisms have found the problem mentioned above is to have special cells in specialized organs, in which only the half number of chromosomes and half the amount of DNA as compared to the non-reproductive body cells are there. And this is done by a process of cell division called meiosis. So, it is done by a process of cell division, wherein what do we get? Half number of chromosomes and half amount of DNA as compared to the non-reproductive body cells. So that cell division process is called meiosis. I'm sure in your previous standards you have learned about meiosis. So when the two germ cells from two different individuals combine during sexual reproduction to form a new individual is result in the number of chromosomes and the DNA which is established in the new generation. We know the process of formation of zygote. If the zygote is to grow and develop into an organism which has highly specialized cells, tissues, and organs, then it has to have sufficient store of energy for doing this. If the zygote is created, then it should have that much amount of energy to do storage, right? Now, in very simple organisms, it is seen that the two germ cells are not very different from one another. Sometimes even they are similar, but as the complexity of the body becomes more, the germ cells are also be specialized. So this is for multicellular organism. And in simple organisms, what do we see? That the germ cells are not very different from one another. But as the body designs become complex, there will be difference in the germ cells also. One germ cell is large and contains the food stores, while other is smaller and it is likely to be motile. Motile means which can move. The motile germ cell is called the male gamete. Please remember this. And the germ cell containing the stored food is called the female gamete. Okay? As the body design becomes complex, there will be difference in germ cells. So, there is one germ cell which is large and it contains the food stores, and that is called female gamete. And the second germ cell is smaller and it is likely to be motile, which means it can move. That is the male gamete. In this chapter only, we will study more about it. We will also see that how the need to create different types of gametes give rise to difference in the female and male reproductive organs. And in some cases, differences in the bodies of the male and female organisms we will learn in the next few sessions.